Welcome back, everyone. I am so incredibly excited to welcome you to the fourth explainer in our series of Psychology of Happiness, titled Culture, Relationships, and Geography of Bliss. So far in this series, we've spent a lot of time looking inward, right? Just really focusing on the individual mind. But today, we're actually going to flip the script a bit. We're setting up a brand new premise. Because human happiness, it goes way, way beyond your own personal thoughts. It's actually deeply woven into the societies we live in, the people we love, and quite literally, the ground we walk on. Let's get right into it.
It's a pretty fascinating question to ask yourself. Is happiness really just in your head? You know, there's this massive Western myth of the self-made happy person. It's this idea that, hey, if you just meditate long enough, or buy the exact right gratitude journal, or force yourself to think positive thoughts, you're going to achieve perfect, unbreakable bliss all by yourself, totally independent of what's happening around you. But come on, human beings don't live in a vacuum, right? The reality is, we experience joy within very specific cultural contexts. We experience it within complex, layered social relationships and within actual physical environments. The bottom line is, you simply cannot understand happiness without understanding the world that your happiness actually lives in.
Okay, so let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the psychology of happiness, then move to how culture shapes joy, followed by relationships as the foundation. After that, we'll hit the geography of bliss, explore the Indian spiritual perspective, and finally wrap up with mapping true human flourishing.
Section 1. The psychology of happiness, a measurable start. Look, before we can start adding all these complex cultural and geographical layers to our map, modern psychology needs a really solid, clear baseline.
And that measurable starting point is what psychologists call subjective well-being. Basically, researchers like Ed Diener and his team back in 1999 broke this down into a few distinct parts. First, it includes our emotional reactions. This means having high positive affect, which, let's be honest, is really just a clinical academic way of saying good moods and joy, along with low negative affect. But it also includes these global, big picture judgments about your overall life satisfaction. So it's looking at both how you feel right in the moment and how you evaluate your life as a whole. But here is the massive catch that we're going to be exploring today. The actual meaning of these components, it shifts dramatically depending on where you happen to live.
Section 2. How culture shapes joy beyond the individual. Because believe it or not, society actually dictates a huge portion of our internal world.
Researchers Marcus and Kitayama found this absolutely stark contrast in how different cultures view the very concept of the self. Think about individualistic cultures, like the United States or a lot of Western Europe. In these places, happiness is tied to what they call an independent self. It is all about personal achievement, autonomy, high self-esteem. You carve your own path. But then you look at collectivistic cultures, like Japan or many indigenous societies, and there is this interdependent view of the self. Happiness over there is deeply, deeply connected to social harmony, family duty, and a sense of belongingness. So we're using the exact same word, happiness, but it carries vastly different expectations depending on which of these columns you fall into. It's wild. Building right on top of that, research by Liu and Gilmore actually distinguishes between individual-oriented and social-oriented subjective well-being. Now, for individualistic people, happiness is judged heavily by internal, personal feelings and self-fulfillment, like, am I achieving my goals? But studies by Oshii, Su, and Diener found that for collectivistic people, happiness is heavily judged by social norms and moral fulfillment. It's way less about, am I getting what I want right now, and much more about, am I fulfilling my role within my community? So culture doesn't just tweak how happiness is defined, it fundamentally rewires what actually causes the happiness. Seriously, ask yourself, do you measure a good day by what you personally achieved, or by how well you supported the people around you?
Culture also acts as this giant emotional regulator. Think about it. In individualistic societies, the open, loud expression of joy, excitement, and personal pride is highly, highly encouraged. We celebrate loudly, right? But in a lot of collectivistic cultures, emotional moderation, humility, and being sensitive to the social atmosphere are actually the ultimate goals. This is absolutely crucial to understand. Just because you don't see someone jumping up and down with excitement doesn't mean they lack inner well-being. A quiet, humble smile in one culture might carry the exact same weight of pure joy as a full-on victory dance in another. Some cultures intentionally discipline and shape happiness into a quieter form specifically to preserve that group harmony.
Moving to Section 3. Relationships as the foundation. Now we're zooming out to our immediate social circles. And we're not talking about relationships as just nice little add-ons to a happy life.
Now, what's really interesting about this quote from Diener and Sigelman is the definitively strong language they use. In their major study of very happy people, they found that a rich social life wasn't just common, it was a constant. Now sure, relationships alone aren't fully sufficient to guarantee happiness. I mean, we all know you can be married or super popular and still be miserable. But researchers like David Myers have proven that they are a necessary condition for it. You literally cannot reach the absolute highest peaks of human flourishing completely on your own. It's just not how we're wired.
So let's break down those core social bonds, because they're essentially the building blocks of joy. First up is family. This is our earliest source of emotional security, our foundational identity, and honestly, in many cultures, it provides the core moral structure we rely on. Next, we have friendship. Friends are basically the family we choose, right? They bring this totally unique brand of companionship, unfiltered emotional expression, and shared humor that you just can't get anywhere else. And finally, broader social support. Having someone, anyone, you can rely on during a severe crisis, a sudden illness, or a deep loss, it doesn't just reduce loneliness, it actually increases your physical and mental resilience. It makes a really difficult, chaotic life feel meaningful and manageable.
Now, when you take those individual bonds and scale them up across a whole community, we build what researchers Helliwell and Putnam call social capital. This is all about those networks, the mutual assistance, and the deep community trust that allows groups to cooperate. Think of neighborhood watch programs, or honestly just feeling comfortable enough to go knock on your neighbor's door to borrow a tool. Their findings clearly show that strong social capital directly supports both your subjective well-being and your physical health. It creates this amazing sort of collective happiness. People feel safe, they feel supported, and they feel treated fairly. They don't feel like isolated, lonely individuals struggling against the world all by themselves.
Section 4. The Geography of Bliss. Now we are zooming out to our widest lens yet, the macro level. Because the actual physical and political places we inhabit profoundly matter.
You can see this vividly in the data from the World Happiness Report. Every year, this report uses the Cantril ladder, basically asking people worldwide to rate their lives on a 0 to 10 scale. But what actually explains why some countries score so much higher than others? Well, it all comes down to structural factors. Obviously, a high GDP per capita fulfills basic material needs, and robust social support provides a crucial safety net. But look at the other factors here, the freedom to make meaningful life choices and low corruption. A nation's overall well-being is heavily shaped by public trust, fair systems, and social equality. When the author Eric Weiner traveled the globe to study this, he realized that happiness isn't just in your head, it is quite literally built into your institutions.
And let's look at how this plays out in our physical surroundings, contrasting the built environment with the natural environment. If you're living in a concrete city that is designed only for speed, endless consumption, and fierce competition, it is naturally going to ramp up your stress and isolation. It just is. Contrast that with a neighborhood that's intentionally designed with green spaces, high walkability, and clean air. A place where you can actually hear birds instead of just blaring sirens. These natural environments do something incredible. They actively restore our attention, they promote calmness, and they organically encourage social interaction. Environmental planning isn't just about traffic, it's directly linked to psychological joy.
This same dynamic plays out when we compare wealth against governance and freedom. Look, economic security is absolutely crucial. We know that poverty and unemployment severely reduce human well-being, but wealth all by itself, it's simply insufficient. Once our basic human needs are met, other geographical and political factors completely take over. Living under good governance, with low corruption, justice, safety, and the actual freedom to make meaningful life choices, that creates a profound, unshakable sense of security. Although, and this is a really critical caveat to remember, this freedom must always be balanced with social support, because too much hyper-individualistic freedom without a safety net can very easily spiral right into anxiety and severe loneliness. Section 5. The Indian Spiritual Perspective. Okay, so now let's pivot and look at a specific cultural lens that just beautifully integrates everything we've mapped out so far: culture, relationships, and geography. Traditional Indian thought draws a really vital distinction between two Sanskrit terms. The first is sukha, which refers to temporary happiness, ease, or pleasantness. You know, the fleeting, day-to-day joys of life, getting a promotion, eating a great meal. But then, there is ananda. Ananda is a much deeper, lasting inner bliss. In traditional Indian culture, true happiness is rarely considered just individual enjoyment. Instead, it's intimately connected to dharma, or righteous living, social harmony, and deep spiritual practice. What's amazing is how closely this mirrors what modern psychology, which draws from ancient Greek philosophy actually, calls eudaimonic well-being. It's this idea of finding happiness through meaning, virtue, and self-realization, rather than just constantly chasing the next fleeting pleasure.
And what is truly fascinating about this perspective is how it views geography. It's essentially a geography of spirit. Here, the physical world, we're talking sacred rivers, towering mountains, pilgrimage routes, old temples, and quiet forests, it's all highly symbolic. These aren't just physical coordinates on a map, they are spaces of transformation. They hold immense, deep meaning through centuries of rituals, memories, and spiritual associations. It really teaches us a vital lesson, that true happiness can often be found in simplicity, quiet contemplation, and harmony with nature, rather than just material abundance. Section 6. Mapping True Human Flourishing. As we move into our conclusion, we are going to synthesize all these distinct layers to figure out what human flourishing actually looks like.
So here is the crucial point we need to emphasize. We must evaluate all these concepts carefully. First off, we absolutely have to avoid cultural stereotypes. Not every Westerner is purely individualistic, right? Societies contain vast amounts of diversity. Second, those world happiness rankings, they are really helpful indicators, but they are not final absolute truths. A high national score doesn't magically guarantee that every single citizen is perfectly happy. Third, while we know relationships are essential, we also have to acknowledge that oppressive families or toxic social pressures can actually severely reduce your well-being. And finally, geography highly influences our joy, for sure, but it does not completely determine it. Your inner resilience still matters deeply, regardless of your zip code.
If there is one core thesis you take away from our time together today, let it be this: a complete psychology of happiness simply cannot be limited to the individual mind. Yes, happiness is profoundly personal, but it is undeniably social. It is an internal state of being, absolutely, but it is deeply supported, shaped, and sustained by the external cultural, relational, and geographical conditions of the world we actually inhabit.
Which leaves us with this final, vital question to ponder. Where will you find your bliss? Now that you know happiness isn't just in your head, take a moment to really look around you. Look at your community, evaluate your relationships, and think about the physical environments you choose to spend your time in. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If you found this dive into the psychology of happiness as fascinating as I did, please take a moment to like this explainer, leave a comment below with your thoughts, share it with someone you care about, and definitely subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of our series. See you next time.